Hi, hello from my home quarantine in the 5th district. I somehow wanted so much to make a video of my text that I wrote over last weeks, and I thought that this time is just a perfect time to read it out to you. It is actually a kind of a practice-infused lecture, as I called it. A title of the text and of the event is called "Sensing the Future: The Somatic Bodies," and it's a text that tries to bridge my choreographic research experiences since 2013, actually already, until now, or until the recent years. And I realized that in my works, all the works I did was examining how we can relate to the world and to one another, and how can we be really active agents in shaping our realities, our relationships, how these relationships change us, and how can we get transformed by them. And also, first of all, what sort of practices are we willing to practice and to shape our life from? So this text is basically about touch, about how touch and how the relationship through touch can transform us, and how could it be a non-verbal way of communicating. I think in these times now, when we are all separated and isolated, I realized that the question of touch and of physical presence and of physicality of the relationship and its materiality is such a huge topic for me at the moment. And so I just wanted to introduce you to this text and show a few pictures from my works that I definitely created in very tight collaborations with two wonderful people. One is Elizabeth Ward from New York, who also lives in Vienna, and I'm gonna talk about the project that I made with her. We made in collaboration, and also another one is Valerie Oberleitner, who is an Austrian choreographer who lives in Paris, that I also started to work with a long time ago. Yeah, so in 2014, 1 year before Italy, Austria, Germany, and the rest of Europe received 100,000 people fleeing war in Syria and elsewhere, I got asked to meet and work with 20 young Afghan men residing in a house run by Diakonie in a small town of Rechnitz in Austria. It was truly an absurd situation to be placing such a project in a town known among others from Elfriede Jelinek's theatre play Rechnitz der Würgeengel, which examines the mass killing of 200 Hungarian Jews murdered there by the Nazis in 1945. The situation of the men also now was not an easy one. Town's inhabitants were rather hostile and accused boys of small thefts, of the garden dwarfs and money. Slowly, men's privileges, such as playing in the park, swimming in a lake, or eating an ice cream in a nearby ice salon, have been taken away by town's major, and they've been stranded in the house. Some of them went to school, while the others, with especially big learning difficulties, stayed in most of the time, bored and with nothing to do, waiting for the slow and inefficient state apparatus to grant them a future. I entered the setting as an artist choreographer, not as a therapist. The house smelled of garam masala, tasted like rice with tomatoes worth €5 a day, sounded like Afghan, Syrian and Somalian autotune and nightmares which woke us up every other night. Our meetings, which we simply called Dancing with Magdalena, were heavily marked by the past overshadowing the present. They became a space where the outbreaks of ethnical or classist mini-wars and sexist comments existed next to traumatizing headaches, the homophobic remarks next to unexpected in the male tenderness. All that was crashing with disappointing here and now, which did not reward the hardships of boys' heroic travels. They were not there anymore, no longer on the run, but still not arriving and welcome anywhere. After all, the bodies wanted to breathe. I made a handstand and 10 push-ups, a breakdance move and acrobatic spin. I got some attention. I came much too close to one of the boys. His name was Kashmir. He was big. I bent and slid my arm in between his legs, grabbed his pelvis and lifted him onto my shoulder. Everyone looked with disbelief and then applauded. This cheap demonstration of physical power was not my intention, but in that very moment it became a radical available gesture initiating change. It crossed multiple borders, between the past and the present, between the queer safe comfort zone and patriarchy at its most, piercing through the political agenda of them versus us present in the media. It was a micro shift big enough to challenge the positions we've been put into and change the perspectives we looked at things from, empowering us to leave other conflicts behind. This movement was a sign of my instant protest, an attack on values which opened up a door for transformation. Walking around with what to me felt like fallen heteronormativity on my back, I slowly allowed myself to feel Kashmir's weight to the fullest, and it got as overwhelming as the complexity of so-called refugee crisis. But it was not the cultural and social standards embedded in our histories which seemed out of sync, but rather the limited codes of possibilities for us all to coexist in the outside world which made me concerned. This embodied gesture presented me with only two solutions: use your muscle power and go on, or release yourself from the weight. In the given context, it made me realize that alternative scenarios situated between those two extremes, between the action of caring or pushing, tension, or giving up or letting go, release, are often missing in real life. Scenarios that would reach beyond dualistic conditioning of our social bodies and beyond the normative discourses on integration and inclusion, beyond the usual distribution of roles and beyond decision-making where the subjects of discussions are not included. Alternatives, building on awareness to the intersectional violence posed by the heteronormative hierarchical structures which are being explored together by the members of LGBTQ POC communities, in therapy groups and within some of the choreographic projects, stay often in the safe spaces only. My urge to look for an opening towards physical realities where other forms of resistance and coexistence could be reimagined outside of the safe spaces was big. Searching for the openings in the codes of relationality we are socialized and between the categories we are pressed into, I decided to close my eyes and trust my senses. From 2016 until 2018, in frame of various festivals, Elizabeth Ward and myself hosted 90-minute long somatic ballet classes in the public space, among others highly frequented shopping malls, in Vienna and in other European cities. This project was created in response to the rise of right-wing politics across Europe, targeting mainly Afghan and Syrian asylum seekers, including our friends. Classes became the space for many somatic encounters between people of different ages, nationalities, and backgrounds, where ballet technique replaced by somatic approach to movement was exorcised rather than exercised. It was called Anti-Fascist Ballet School. I would like to ask you now to please close your eyes and stay with eyes closed as long as I tell you to open them. We stayed on the floor, listened to the noise, and tried not to give in to a fear of being stepped on by the customers of the supermarket. With our eyes closed, the roles, functions, categories, representations and identities shaped by our past and present daily practices of becoming, of how we come into being and get articulated, got blurred, and other forms of experiential existing occurred. From the inside there was no Afghan men, no white women, no people of color, no professionals and no amateurs, no refugees, no citizens, only individual experiences of our proprioceptive senses, the weight of our bodies, the way we made contact with the floor, temperature we felt, soundscape we absorbed. From that state of a sensorial awareness, we traveled through the space and discovered our surrounding. With our eyes closed, we lose the sense of directionality. Our first sensation of being disoriented manifests in a posture full of fear and mistrust, arms stretched out forward, upper body leaning backwards, fingertips and feet tapping around and carefully checking for obstacles. Movements are either very slow or very hectic. There is frequent bumping into others and into objects, giggling and talking, exposing awkwardness and embarrassment caused by an act of incidental touch. Tensed bodies trying to traverse the space search for security on the floor, where there is no vertigo, and where the skin surface making contact with the floor helps them to navigate around. The instances of touch, first manifested as immediate retractions away from the objects and other bodies, slowly turn into hypersensitive, longer encounters between two or more individuals. Fingertips start tracing carefully the other's faces and backs. Palms of the hands meet and merge in minute-long, miniature sensitive dances. Body surfaces rest on other body surfaces. Heads meet, sensuous embraces between strangers happen in the midst of supermarket. In a group of different individuals working with their eyes closed, we slowly observe a transformation in their sensitivity, leading to altered intentionality and relationality. Touch givers as well as touch receivers interchange their roles at their own pace. They reach out to touch, yet at times decide not to. Touched ones determine how long they want the contact to last. As there is no grabbing, grasping, nor holding, the fear of touch that's been there at first turns into a hypersensitive state of alertness, yet with no tension. The skin relaxes and gives in to the information. It meets on its way. Reactive to temperature, to texture, to the weight and pressure, It lingers in a state of synesthetic listening. You can open your eyes now. Skin. Our biggest perceptive organ, our border for incoming and outcoming information, is a sensus map of our individual and collective individuations. Feeling someone's hand on our body stirs a myriad of socio-cultural personalized contracts embedded in our skins, reaching far beyond our cognition. Each time we get touched, we experience a brief internal spin of affect, thought, and sensation, as if questions would pile up on the surface of our skin. Either we know the answers to those questions and we give in to, accept the touch, or when those answers are not clear, we get confused, fearful, and rejected. The inner negotiation between the recognition and decision-making happens within milliseconds. The variety of and reactions to the touch we as adults usually encounter and perform on a daily basis are pretty limited and stay in the range of the socio-cultural conventions. We escape physical assaults and violence, engage in the intimate situations with people we know, cuddle with kids and family, nurse babies and elderly, pay for a massage or a shiatsu session. We get drawn very close to the loved ones and wish to stay far away from the others, leaving a whole range of possibilities spread between those two extremes unexplored. Our interactions with others are strictly governed according to the rules of the public space. Public space which requires a performance of clearly timed, spaced, and choreographed instances of touch, formal handshakes, hugs, embraces, versus secure touchless paying methods and hand disinfection, choreography based on fear. We are to experience our intimacy in a private space, our safe space, which at times becomes a space of a violent touch or of touch's absence. Our dialogical relations are inscribed into codes of interpersonal communication of a still patriarchal state, dividing us and our interactions into categories. The idea of turning touch into something exclusive and existent only within certain register makes it often inaccessible to the ones falling out of the approved categories and leaves a big amount of society on the margin. Turned into a commodity, sold in the form of wellness treatments, somatic movement workshops, cuddle sessions, Tinder dates, and care work, these instances of touch reinforce capitalist culture and our subjection to it. In this sense, choreographic research can become a unique safe space to rehearse autonomy, a place where choreography plays a role of a reorganization tool, preparing the body to act outside as an active agent of change. About art including choreography as a reorganization tool, Alva Noe writes very well about in his book Strange Tools, Art and Human Nature. Anti-Fascist Ballet School and I Choreography, a project dealing with our addiction to internet, were attempts to reclaim somatic movement methods and to transform their function within the artistic and social processes. Since years, somatics have been used in dance for self-optimization. To transform the quality of movement and perception, they have led in turn to the brand new dance aesthetics. In today's tech culture, somatic body methods, including concepts of mindfulness, are being used in big corporations as a new form of affective investment expected to increase innovation and productivity. But might be that the biggest potential of somatic practices can unfold when they become practices of entering into relations, tools of sensuous conversation. The rendering of touch, which arose from the practice of authentic movement shared by dancers and non-dancers of different ages and origins in a group setting, is a consequence of somatic movement methods applied as a dialogical practice. It came to life as a byproduct of authentic movement, method which became our antidote against disembodiment plaguing our societies. Finding first the way back to our senses, we later decided to actively engage in sensuous encounters also with the others. Engaging with others altered our focus, and in a state of shared attention, we observed how our internal body-mind processes not only led to the external expressions, but how they started to inform the instances of touch we shared with others, how they affected the quality and character of the encounters. Unlike in contact improvisation, somatic touch does not employ muscular weight and pressure. Neither does it operate in the realm of grabs, lifts, pulls with the leader and the follower. Somatic touch stays on the surface and operates within tiniest instances of affect and sensitivity. It does not give clear directions or orders. It asks and listens in the act of dialogical negotiation. In this conversation, it is skins, constantly asking and re-articulating the intentions of the one touching and the one being touched. Bodies, writes Jean Gnosy, are forms articulated in touch. Here, bodies engage in a process of constant re-articulation, and touch is a constant movement, a dance, reorganizing the form through a reorganization of the senses. Body never reaches stillness, as alert skins dwell in a state of search and anticipation. In a groundbreaking book, Politics of Touch, Sense Movement Sovereignty, Erin Manning writes, "Every act of reaching toward enables the creation of worlds. This production is relational. I reach out to touch you in order to invent a relation that will in turn invent me. I do not touch the you that I think you are. I reach toward the one you will become. To touch is to engage in the potential of an individuation. Individuation is understood as the capacity to become beyond identity." In a group setting, somatic instances of touch, the sensual leaps into unknown, become a premise to a collective individuation. Through a process of constant re-articulation, we engage in the worldings governed by different means of communication. Through touch only, we reconfigure not only ourselves and the others, allowing for endless sensus engenderings beyond the touch vocabulary of the state. We also reconstitute our notion of space, time, and direction as a collective, gaining a brand new sense of orientation and belonging, guided by the sensation rather than by directionality inscribed into efficiency and production. Somatic touch is not a stable concept. It lives only through practice and needs to be consciously reclaimed, reactivated, and shared as a physical strategy against the norms we easily slide into. As a practice against indifference and against disembodiment in public space, somatic touch becomes a practice of courage and resistance. With eyes closed, sensing only, I reject accepting preordained categories such as citizen, refugee, homeless, woman, man, and reject to act within the regular codes of communication. Reaching towards the other, inviting him, her into a process of resistance lived through senses, yet holding no visual information about the other, it becomes a risk-taking operation and a training of trust. In the realm of this public space, somatic demonstration, as we called it, becomes an opening, a crack in the wall of the cultural, political, and heteronormative conventions, celebrating vulnerability through the sensuous encounters as a legitimate way of being in the world. Concentrated, silent, soft bodies in contact, falling out of the choreographic patterns of consumption and individualization. Unproductive bodies as tools of experience, bound by a contract of lived sensuous negotiation. Regaining their senses, these bodies take responsibility for practicing their own articulation and reclaim their active participation in shaping of the world. They resist division into shapes, forms, names, and categories, creating frames for equity to be remembered and re-established. The collective practice of somatic touch in shopping malls, train stations, public squares, theaters, refugee shelters, historical sites, parks, and during political demonstrations turned the public space into a safe space. Within Anti-Fascist Ballet School and I-Choreography, we applied the choreographic research process onto a social space, inserting an accessible space of open practice on the intersection of both. Here, choreography became a social practice, and her tools could be used, shared, passed on, and further developed by multiple agents active within diverse communities, including teenagers, asylum seekers, artists, curators, and passers-by. Collective practice of somatic touch came to life through an act of exploration of that space spread in between the extremes, searching for alternatives in between the act of pushing and of letting go, in between the social and choreographic, the private and the public, in between the skins. It lives as a communal practice of regaining and sustaining our senses we all can freely join and cultivate. Thank you very much.